The Learning Place, Portsmouth City Council's community learning provision, was successful in achieving 2 rounds of GISC Advanced Further Education and Skills Development and Resource Programme tender money. The first was to produce 3 apps for their learners, and the second was to disseminate the project to different providers. This is part of that dissemination to different providers. We wanted to leave something for sustainability so that anybody that wanted to learn about the project, what we learnt doing the project, and to see the sorts of things that we would suggest other providers take on board. Portsmouth City Council's The Learning Place is an adult and community learning provider offering community learning style courses and family learning courses. We're using the PowerPoint that we actually used in our final dissemination events, and so this slide shows you what the aims of those dissemination events were. It was to raise awareness of the PCC Learning with Apps project and to introduce effective ways of using apps to support teaching and learning. And by the end of our dissemination sessions, we wanted the participants to go away knowing about the project, to be more aware of different educational apps available, and to have some hands-on experience of using apps and of using tablets. So what was our project all about? Well, we wanted mainly our younger learners to start to make use of the technologies that they already had in their pockets. We wanted them to start using tablets or their mobile phones to access apps or provide them with apps so that they can continue studying between their different sessions. And we wanted to make 3 apps. So our original project was to design and create 3 apps that our students could use. We were particularly looking at literacy and numeracy apps, but we were considering anything in the initial stages. So the first thing we did was to get staff together and ask them what sort of apps they would like to see, and we got all sorts of ideas, from Indian head massage apps, reflective journal apps, to the literacy and numeracy shopping apps, learning your tables apps, etc. We then also asked our learners, we took a learner survey, and what we wanted to do from our learners is to find out if they had mobile devices. Were they Android, were they Apple, were they Windows based, etc., so that we could decide which kind of area we should target our apps at. We also wanted to know if they currently used apps and if they would be interested in using educational apps. We found in our survey that there was very little difference. There was no one popular phone. Android devices represented about 60% to everything else being 40%. I think the main leader in that was iPads, but there was a variety of devices in use. Once we'd surveyed the learners, we then went off to explore what was already out there. What was already out there for English and maths, and that's where the saying "there's an app for that" came up. There are, hundreds of thousands of apps out there, and it's growing every day. So we started to narrow the search. Would it be useful looking at just educational apps? And we found even that wasn't really very useful. We decided actually to start putting things into categories. So we started looking for specific subject apps, so the English and maths style apps. We started to look for things that would support studying, so our study tools style of apps, things that would help with communication apps inside and outside the classroom, ways of storing things. It instantly became obvious that in order to pass photographs, etc., or audio files, that we needed some way of dropping them into somewhere so that somebody else could pick them up. So storage style apps. We needed assessment style apps and reflection and evaluation style apps, and we kind of linked things in. And there was something else that we used also, and that was course delivery. Was there anything out there that teachers could use in delivering courses. So that was kind of where we started at categorising apps for use. And while we were categorising them and finding these apps, we tried some of them out. And in trying them out, you find all sorts of things, especially when you're looking at English and maths apps. We find first and foremost that there are a lot of apps that just we couldn't use because they weren't UK appropriate. Lots of the apps were American, and so they had American spellings, or they had, in the numeracy side, we had the dollar signs. Lots of apps in English and maths are of course created for children, and although some can be used, a lot of them just instantly ruled out because they weren't age appropriate. We wanted free apps. We didn't want our learners to incur a cost, but if we came across an app that we thought was really good, then we would say, you know, this you might find useful, but there is a cost, you know, and we could show it on our devices. And we wanted advert-free apps. We didn't want apps where we had no control about what adverts were going to come up. And it's at that point we discovered that some apps, in fact quite a lot of apps, are initially advert-free, but after you've used them and played whatever is on them a few times, adverts start to appear, which is incredibly annoying. And it wasn't possible to have some apps that were completely advert-free, but we tried our hardest to. It is at that point we wished that we could just repurpose apps and that, you know, that opportunity was available, but there wasn't. And so we went down the route in our original project of building our own apps. So that took us back to well, what platform should we build it on? And it's at that point we asked Portsmouth City Council, we asked JISC for help and advice. And their recommendation was that we went for web-based apps, which would then work on any learning platform. And so we thought, well, do we have the skills to produce these apps? And we decided that no, we probably didn't, and so we started to work in partnership with Portsmouth City Council. We started to work in partnership with Portsmouth University. And Portsmouth University, like all other universities, have students who are on programming courses at degree level, at master's level, and those final year programming students have to do some sort of project where they have to plan and produce something. And so we thought this was the ideal opportunity to see if we could get some final year students on board to produce our apps for us. And we did, but we were late in getting the go-ahead with the original project funding, and most of the university students had by that time chosen which project they wanted to do. Now, because of that, our advice for anybody else doing this doing a kind of let's make apps with our university students, our advice would be to you to talk to them during the spring term of the academic year, so that students who are in their second year approaching their final year, in the final term, can see what you're after. They can see what sorts of apps you want to be created, and they can decide during their final summer term whether that's something they'd like to do. And there is a timeline with the university students. They work on their projects during the autumn and the spring terms, so they would be producing the app during the autumn term and then wanting to trial it and test it sort of late the second half of the spring term. They need to complete and hand everything over sort of during April. So you need to think about how you're going to work with them, how you're going to meet them, to deliver trials. They need to trial with tutors, they need to trial with learners, the apps that they produce. So that's the kind of time frame. But we were lucky in getting a student, and the student produced the Turning Tables app, which you can download from this project area if you want to use it. It has a very basic look. That was the design that we wanted. We wanted a very plain look. We wanted it so that we could use it with the students themselves and in family learning, so that maybe the children could use it. The Turning Tables app works replicating the way that one method of teaching tables is used within the classroom, so a flip card method, where basically you would learn your tables by having 1 times 7 written on one side of the card and the answer 7 written on the other side. You'd give the learners the times table for the 7 times table from 0 times 7 to 10 times 7, and they would first and foremost learn that table in order. Then they would shuffle all the cards up, and then when you think you know the table, you would look at the answers, so 49, how many 7s go into that, and you would look back at the question to find out how many. And that's why it's got an in order option, a mixed, single mixed, a multiple mixed, and a flip option. And the app works so that you can learn one table in order and you can have it singularly mixed up, or you can have multiple mixed. So what happens in that case is you can pick the 5, as in here, the 5, 6 and 7 times table, and you can have them mixed, so random questions coming at you from those tables. And as I say, when you think you've got it, you can flip it. Also included are some hints for each table, so if you get stuck as a learner, you can ask for a hint and it'll give you some strategies for calculating that particular table. Because we only had one university student, we needed to look at other ways of producing other apps, and we went to a commercial producer of apps and we asked them to produce a shopping app which looks at percentages off, fraction discount, and the sort of offers you get, the 2 for 1, 3 for 2, etc. And this did a little calculator so that while you were in the shop, basically you could put in the price, you could put the percentage discount, and it would tell you, you know, the amount you would be expected to pay, the discount you were getting, and how it was worked out. That app, again, was web-based. We went out and asked 3 app makers to quote on a specification that we produced. We learnt from producing the first app, well, our poor university student got very little help from us, and you know, basically got the idea, this is kind of what we want, can you produce it? And then we constantly said to them, oh, could you also do this? Could you also do that? Like, you know, add in a timer to make it a bit more fun for people who wanted to put themselves under a bit of pressure. We learnt from that that wasn't a good way, and that we really needed to plan properly. So when we went to the commercial supplier, we actually sat down and planned out what we'd like the app to look like, and we used PowerPoint so that we got, this is what we'd like the screen to do, and if you did that we'd like the next screen to look like this, and etc, etc. We gave kind of a brief overview in PowerPoint, which was really useful, and it meant there wasn't a lot of going backwards and forwards to the app producer. One of the things that we did find with going to a commercial supplier is that we did go for 3 different tenders. We found that most app producers wouldn't even consider anything that was below £14,000 for the production of that app. We were lucky in that we found somebody that was prepared to do as a deal, as it was an educational one, but we got a very, very basic app for the amount we had in our budget to pay for that app. And the final app, we decided to see if we could produce it ourselves. What we wanted was something for our family learning students where it would push out an idea each week during their course that they could go away and then use with students. Now, what we discovered with this was that we started looking at the free app makers online. So there's little tools that you can use to help you produce apps. At the time, we found it just was taking so long that we couldn't go ahead with that route, which was, you know, we thought sad, until we thought, right, okay, we need our tutors to be able to do this, so perhaps an app isn't the right thing anyway, even if they've got to just put the information for that week into the app. It's obviously not the right tool using these online freebie tools. We decided instead to go down a blog route, and we set up a WordPress blog, and it was at that point we discovered that actually there are plugins to WordPress blogs that allow you to convert them into apps. We chose one that has unfortunately since ceased to function, but if you still wanted that to be an app, there are additional plugins that convert your WordPress blog to an app. The one we chose at the time was free. as long as you had less than 5,000 subscribers. Once you hit 5,000, then there was a monthly charge. It was very small, but there was a monthly charge. What we discovered instead was actually, for learners on that course, we just get them to find it on their mobile device, find the blog, and then to bookmark it so they could keep going in each week and exploring what their task was going to be with their students, or ideas that they could use with their children. So that's the 3 apps that we produced as part of the original project. And alongside those 3 apps, while we were doing the research about what apps already exist, and since starting the project and tutors starting to use apps, we discovered a lot of other apps that we would now recommend to other providers. And so we'd like to give you a look and an overview of some of those apps and how they've been used and why we've suggested them, either to teaching staff, to learners, or to teachers and learners. So to start with, we'd like to talk to you about the Study Tools apps. And we've recategorised from our original categories shown earlier. We've recategorised to different categories, as you'll see as we go through this presentation. But study tools are tools that we would advise learners to download to their own devices so that they could support their own learning. Joe's going to talk to you in a minute about the brain training app that we suggested, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of the other apps that we would suggest that learners download. We'd suggest that they download some sort of to-do list, whether that be To-Doodle or Wunderlist or a reminder, just so that they've got some sort of organisational skill support. And it's personal preference, and a lot of devices come with those kind of reminders or to-dos. Another app that we found was In Class. This is an app that is available for iPads, and it allows learners to keep a timetable, to make a note of when assignments are due and get reminders on those. So if it's a full-time student with lots of different classes, that could be a useful one for them. Mind mapping software we would definitely encourage learners to use, and Joe is going to talk about MindDomo and PCC's use of that, so I'll skip over that as well. Poplet is available for iPads, and it's a pictorial mind mapping tool. Again, useful for those subjects where people want to be very visual. It's also really useful as an assessment, so you can have a picture, an audio or text associated with that picture. We'd also recommend to learners that perhaps they download a PDF document scanner, depending on what course they're on. If they're on numeracy, there are calculators on your apps anyway, but there are other sorts of calculators or conversion tools that you can download. So there's a multiple converter, so weights and measures, temperatures, etc. they might want to convert, and that would allow them to automatically check answers to questions that they were using. There's also fraction calculators, so they might want to use that to help them check answers as well. For literacy or for the community learning, they might want the Wikipedia app. There are various Google apps that could be useful, but although Google Docs is there, we'd encourage them to have some sort of word processing spreadsheet presentation tool, again depending on what course they're on. So it might not be Google Docs, it might be Office 365 if your provider has subscribed to that, or it could be Polaris, etc. for Office. Google Earth, useful again for numeracy and scaling. Google Goggles for translating from one language to another. We'd recommend that learners download some sort of flashcard maker app so they can create their own revision tools. And then standard on any tablet or mobile device, of course, are things like the camera tool, which is great for self-reflection, it's great for assessment. There are notes apps available, clocks of course, calendars and schedulers, useful for remembering things and booking in when they might have a tutorial or they might have a test or an exam. Browsers, they come with one browser, they might want different browsers, and if they're using iPads, then if they download the Puffin browser, then they could see Flash-based learning objects, and PCC had been producing some Xerti resources which originally were Flash-based and now are HTML5. So that's why we've suggested that one. I'm going to pass over to Jo, and she's now going to talk to you about the brain training app that PCC are using.
Brain training has been around for a number of years. It started sort of back in the Second World War, when we needed to improve our reaction times of the RAF with the fighter pilots. They started realising actually that our brains were programmed very slowly to identify aircraft coming towards us. So they wanted really to speed up reaction times and get us using the whole of our brains. Some of the initial brain training machines that came in, as you can see here, were very, very large. Going on into the 1990s, there was a lot of work done through schools in terms of brain gym and children being encouraged to do exercises before class to improve their learning. Things develop all the time. Going on, we've then seen commercial versions of brain training brought into some of the first handheld games machines that came in. Nintendo developed a range of brain training games that could be used on handheld games. So benefits of brain training sort of fall into a number of areas really. First of all, they encourage the faster thinking. We're able to react a lot quicker. We don't need quite so much thinking time. Our memory, we develop strategies for learning our memory, and these can all increase our productivity, mean we're faster at getting things done, we feel more positive about different areas, and we're more sort of inclined to have a go. This is a version of a brain training app that can be downloaded, and it's one that we have worked with to try to help our learners to develop sharper skills. We found this has been very useful, linked to some spelling and literacy programs. The game that we've downloaded can be downloaded onto Android devices. This is recommended that you complete this brain training app every day, and what you can do is to do a general test that looks at a number of areas of functionality within the brain and will give you a daily brain age. It tests your brain on a various different number of levels. On the first game here, you have to click on the numbers into a sequence. It's really, really good and helps you to develop skimming and scanning techniques. So you're learning to sweep and to get your eyes to look further than just the number that is immediately in front of you. The next game looks at memory through the idea of pairs and matching numbers in a pairs game. Not revolutionary, been around a long time, but what we can do is to get learners to start to think of developing strategies to actually identifying the numbers, and it can help improve on their memory. This game is a bit Marmite, people either love it or hate it. What this does is encourages both sides of your brain to try to work in harmony together. You have to select the colour of the word that comes up in the example, but you have to match the colour and find the word. It really, really confuses your brain and makes you have to really stop and think about it. You know, the theory's been around quite a long time. what it does is helps with your speed of processing and makes you really use the both sides of the brain. So holistically, that's best for total learning to take place. Some of the other games here that we look at, we've got the old rock, scissors, paper, stone. It looks at your intuition. It helps you to speed up your decision making process and think about things. Mental maths tests have encourage you to get yourself thinking, look at your how you can mentally take information and work examples through faster in your mind, and you do get faster, I think, over time. Learners find this one tough to start with, but it's amazing how soon you get used to actually doing the mental math in your head. The bottom test here looks at your speed of reaction. You're given a time in seconds, and you have to then touch the screen when you think that you've reached that point. So it gets learners pausing, thinking, and judging time as well. So all those numbers are calculated together to give you a daily brain age. So it can act as quite competitive. You want to improve your score. You want to try to get that sharpness down. At this point, we would encourage participants.
Some of the communication apps that we would recommend that teachers and or learners thought about using are things like Evernote together with Sketch. Evernote allows you to create little projects basically, so that you can put in text, you can add video that you've taken off your mobile device, you can add photographs, and if you produce the photographs in Sketch then you can annotate them, so they could be used for assessment. Anything you've done there automatically uploads into Evernote, and then you can share with others, so you've got a way of communicating what you've done with others. There are a huge range of apps that are available, so having access to Google Drives or Dropbox has been one way that we've managed as teaching staff to share resources between ourselves, or our learners and ourselves, quite easily. But there are, of course, other things that you'd be aware of. There are Facebook apps, and the Learning Place has a Facebook account and a Twitter account, so those are ways of, again, communicating with the learners. One fun thing, which isn't really a communication tool, more a way of producing resources, is an app called Telegami, which allows you to do scene building. You get a character that the learners can add a voice to, or add text, which is then converted to a voice. You can manipulate the character, so you can change the character to be to look different. In the family learning, one of the ideas here was that parents could create themselves, but in animated, or as a little animation, so that they could say something to their children, which could be a quite fun thing. Something maybe where they were worrying about something at school, such as I don't know, a test coming up or whatever. They could make that into a little animated character, or they could work on telling a story with their children through the use of Telegami. Another potential use with the LD&D students would be with autistic learners. Potentially they could give themselves a voice, but through a character, and we know that one of the learning providers in the Southwest did a research previously on this, so we know that that is a possibility for use with LDD learners. It's great for scenario setting. Under assessment tools, there are quite a lot of assessment tools that can be used. Quizlet and Socrative are quiz building tools. There are, of course, the camera on any mobile device, and then on an iPad, you'd have things like Photobabble, which allow you to take a photograph and then to talk over it, which could be very useful for assessment. There's recording devices or recorder apps so that you can do audio recording and share. If you're using Moodle, of course you can, if you download the Moodle app, then you can record. You can take recordings on your own device or video on your own device or photographs on your own device and upload those directly into your private files area on Moodle. So again, if you use your device, then you could assess learners using your tablet and get it straight into Moodle. The other things that are available are things like Screen Chomp, which provides you with like a whiteboard, an interactive whiteboard, where learners can model things on theirs and save them as recordings, or again, if you did it on your tablet, work tablet, then it could go from your work tablet through to Dropbox or Moodle. Animoto, which allows you to create videos from photographs, and the early slides in this presentation were made using Deck, which is a great little app. It looks for Creative Commons pictures, so you don't have that fear of it, and you can encourage learners to create presentations that have very few words on it, so it then encourages them to, when they present to the rest of the class, to work on their speaking skills. So they have to plan and present, so you're practicing those two areas of skills. Very useful for literacy or functional skills English. Class Dojo is a class behaviour app. It allows you to set up an account yourself where you put up learners into it, so you would just use their first names to ensure no data protection, but you can give behaviour awards for punctuality, for teamwork, and areas like that. You can change the images, so you don't need to go with the images that are in Class Dojo, which aren't really age appropriate. It's being considered for trial, basically. It might be useful with LDD learners, and it might also be useful with family learning. We do know of a college that are using it. Barking and Dagenham College are using it extensively with their learners, and it's proved to be very successful. So it's something that is under consideration. We thought it was useful to put together a collection of teaching tools, and Jo is going to speak about Mindamo in a moment, but other things that we've been experimenting with and encouraging the use of are things like QR codes. Norton Snap is one QR code reader that we might encourage learners to download. It's Norton, it's the people that make the virus checking software, and it does check your QR code and advises whether or not it thinks you should open it. It's a free app. Another app would be something like Augmented Reality or Rasma app, which allows you to, very similar to QR codes, it allows you to access a video or another resource or a website based on you scanning a photograph or an image of some sort. Explain Everything gives you an interactive whiteboard. It's very like Educreations, which is an app for iPads. Explain Everything isn't a free app, but it could be a useful teacher tool app, especially for numeracy teachers, so that they can demonstrate or model something and then share that with their learners. Nearpod relies on you having a lot of tablets, which at the moment the Learning Place doesn't have, but if you had a class full of tablets, or you had bring your own device, then it's certainly something they would consider using in the future. Nearpod allows the teacher to upload a PowerPoint into Nearpod, and then in between slides put in multiple choice questions, a straight whiteboard, a website, all sorts of different things like that. They then ask learners to sign into Nearpod and to look at that particular presentation with a code. So as they flick their slides and their presentation, it automatically locks the learner into the same thing so that you're all looking at the same thing at the same time. And when you get to a particular question, learners answer it, the teacher sees all the results. If you're looking at a whiteboard and you ask learners, again, if I look at maths, to model how they would do a calculation, or to draw, to work through that, or to draw something and submit that to the teacher, they would see all of those answers and then could share back with the group the particular one they want to use. Other teaching tools, if you deliver webinars, if you have webinar software, then you need the Adobe Connect or the particular plugin on a tablet machine to actually access those. If you don't have Moodle, then you might be looking at Edmodo as another way of delivering things. We also advise they look at things like getting Khan Academy and TED for their own professional development or for things they might share with learners. And as we have a YouTube account, then having the YouTube app is certainly very useful. Jo is now going to talk to you though about the use of Mindomo, a mind mapping app at the Learning Place.
On the course to think how they might use this with their learners. Whilst there's lots of different types of mind mapping technology around, we find that we particularly like Mindoma. It's given us the ability to use this with one of our tutors who is dyslexic, who likes to see things very, very visually. The beauty of this particular package is that it enables us to upload various number of resources which can help both the teacher in terms of her own planning and organisation, and also enables her in the same place to keep links to videos and resources that she can use in the classroom with her learners. After we first disseminated this and showed Mindoma to a number of our other tutors, we went down the path of buying a package so as a number of the staff could use this, again both in their planning and in the classroom. For my part, as a quality and curriculum officer, it's great for me because it gives me the opportunity to have an insight into what is going into the classes and to be able to sample a lot of the activities and a lot of the links that are being used in the classroom on a regular basis. Quizlet is something that I've used with a number of students in a learning support capacity. It's proved invaluable as a revision resource, especially when you're providing learner support and you don't quite know what learners might bring to the table. It's given the opportunity to look at a diverse range of subjects through from spelling to specific terminology that have been used, in example for biology students. There's a range of quizzes that have already been uploaded on there that you can tap in and use without having to always design your own, which has been really useful.
And then of course there are the subject specific apps. Jo is going to talk about Pinterest and the self-help anxiety app and the driving test app in a moment, so I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of the other apps. And to start with, I'm going to talk about the Maths Everywhere app, which was created by Bolton College in association with NIACE, an excellent app which the maths teachers at the Learning Place are certainly using, including the fact that all the videos that are included in the app are also on YouTube, so can be used separately and all together. Other apps that we found that were really nice were a couple of apps that link together by the same person making them. Is one called Skill Builder Numeracy and Skill Builder Spelling. Now, one of those apps is available on both platforms, and I think it's the numeracy one, and one is just available on iPads. The thing that we really like about those apps is that they are very clear and basic looking, but they've got a really useful functionality behind them. So the Skills Builder numeracy app allows the teacher to put in, it practices with the learner, it practices the skills of the 4 rules, but you can do them from a very simple level of numbers 1 to 10 only, or you can make them really complicated with large numbers and include decimal places. It allows the student to go through and do a certain number of questions, and then it tells them which ones they've got right and which ones they've got wrong. With the Skill Builder spelling, it goes through the look, cover, write, check method, but it allows you to upload spelling lists for that particular learner, and there's 2 levels of difficulty with that particular app. So it's one of the few apps that actually allows the individual spellings to be used as a way of practice. And there are other spelling apps, it's finding ones that are age appropriate, as we've said before. Alongside spelling, there are of course dictionary apps which also include audio, so they can hear the words said as well as read it and read what it means. For other kind of apps, we had to think outside the box really. We did find it was really hard to find English and maths apps when we were looking that were age appropriate and were UK appropriate. But since alongside us doing this, our project, NICE and some of the other national organisations were putting together apps lists, and there is of course a website called Apps for Us which has got a list of suggested maths apps. For general kind of resources, we would suggest things like the National Rail Inquiry app for timetabling, for looking at times in a functional way, BBC News app for up-to-date reading matter. I found that when I was looking for maths resources, one place that you could find resources was on revision. So if you looked for revision style apps, you could find English and Maths GCSE revision style, which had embedded videos. Unfortunately, many of those apps were only free to a point, so you only got opened up so many videos, and then you had to kind of pay for those apps. But another place for English would be the British Council apps and the British Council website, which has had a massive amount of regeneration, or should I say they've been looking at it again, and they've been producing a lot more resources which could be used in English classes as well as in ESOL classes. The Learning Style app, do all learners know their learning styles? There are quite a few learning style apps out there which we found to be useful. And if you're with learners at lower levels, perhaps book creation apps, or with family learning students creating books with their learners from photographs and then adding some words in. Again, very, very useful. As I say, Jo's now going to talk about the other apps I haven't mentioned here.
Pinterest is an app that we've used a number of times now. It's proved quite popular in our Parent Power courses, where we've got learners thinking about what makes a perfect parent and finding pictures which they've pinned onto their boards and have then spoken about, and it's been used to generate discussion. A couple of my arts and crafts tutors also use it quite a lot to help to find some new ideas and to increase the range of crafts that they're delivering with learners. So it's been a valuable resource tool for them. Sam Learning is another app that's been really helpful. We're seeing an increasing number of students who've got difficulties dealing with stress and anxiety, and it's a handy little app that brings together a number of areas that they can look at to help reduce stresses and worries that they've got. Some are really fairly straightforward, like doing some basic breathing techniques, and encourages them to hold their breath for a certain length of time and to take regular and deep breathing in and out. Particular favourite is one where learners are encouraged to physically colour in one of the pictures that's on the screen, and what happens is the rhythmic sensation of the colouring automatically regulates your breathing as you're going along, which has proved really quite popular. The driving test app is a great way of embedding some functional English into a course and capturing on learners' interests. The theory test is something that a number of our learners have to undertake and become quite anxious about. So it's an ideal opportunity to sort of marry their interests and what they have to do together with their English.
Finally, we wanted to share some other ideas and other ways of introducing apps, or in particular the maths resources that the Learning Place have been involved with. And so in the PowerPoint, if you open up the final PowerPoint, you will find that there are links to some resources, or some example resources that we've created and put together in a tool called XTLearn. There's some Xerti resources that could be downloaded or used from within tablets, and also we've created a couple of Pinterest boards, one called Learning with Apps, with these apps that we've been suggesting on it, and one specifically on maths resources for you to have a look at. So that's our dissemination of the Learning with Apps project and additional apps that we would recommend.